All right, guys, so this interview here that you're about to see on MSNBC, it's cathartic. Is that the right word I'm looking for? Cathartic? I think that's the right word I'm looking for. Jeremy Scahill, formerly The Intercept and now Drop Site News with Ryan Grimm, he is talking to Ahmed on MSNBC. And, you know, credit to Ahmed. He has done a fantastic job on this. Ali Velshi has done a fantastic job on this. And even Joyanne Reid has actually been surprisingly good on the issue of Israel and Gaza. But everybody else has been kind of abysmal, right? Maybe every now and then Chris Hayes does okay, but like Matt Howe didn't talk about it at all. Like the usual suspects are not that good on this issue. So I'm sure Jeremy Scahill was shocked that he was even invited on MSNBC in the first place, but he was. And they're going to talk a little bit about the assassination of the Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar. Now, Israel released the video of this, and I mean, it just shows how much they're in their own bubble that they thought releasing this would be like a good look for them. The guy goes down fighting, right? Hamas uses human shields. They hide behind women and children. And in this video, he's not hiding behind any women. He's not hiding behind any children. He's injured. And he literally, till his last dying breath, he was fighting back, and he threw like a stick or a pole or something at a drone, which was in the midst of assassinating him. Right? And it just shows like, oh, the Israelis using death machines from the sky and pressing a button to do their dirty work, as Yahya Sinwar was like just covered in dirt and injured and bloody and fighting till his dying breath. Like, if anything, you turn this guy into a resistance hero by releasing this video, right? So anyway, it shows how deep they're in their own bubble. They don't see how this would look to the outside world. But here's Scahill talking to Ahmed, and man, this gets heated very quickly, and Scahill goes Inski. Watch this.
Jeremy, it's great to see you again. I know you've covered Hamas extensively throughout the year. You know a lot about Yahya Sinwar and other Hamas leaders. Can you tell us why, first of all, he has been so controversial as a figure to the Israelis and the Americans even before October 7th?
That kind of is a funny question, right? He's a leader of Hamas. So, of course, they're going to look at him like that anyway.
I just want to begin by saying that as we're speaking tonight, the Israelis are waging an extermination campaign in the north of Gaza. For the past 2 weeks, they've surrounded the area, and they've intensified it after the killing of Yahya Sinwar. No food or medicine of any kind has reached most parts of the north. I'm in direct touch. I'm in with medical officials in the north and with journalistic colleagues. I understand that at least 80 people have been killed tonight in a horrifying set of attacks on half a dozen residential buildings. I've just gotten done seeing images from the ground where children are being shredded like meat in a butcher shop. I don't understand how any of us, whether we're journalists or not, this isn't about objectivity, how any of us can watch this genocide unfold in real time and watch the pontificating of the politicians running for president and not just cry out, this has to stop. I mean, this has to stop. We've looked at this. I mean, I know you've reported on the ground from Gaza. I mean, we're watching a genocide in real time, and I'm sorry, but on this network also, there are people who have promoted propaganda from Israel. There are people cheerleading for those running for office who are lying to the American people about concern for the Palestinians. And yes, we should talk about Yahya Sinwar. But Yahya Sinwar is also in many ways the story of Gaza.
So he's asked about Yahya Sinwar, and he's like, bro, we're doing this interview right now. I just got done looking at videos of kids with their heads blown off and people, innocent civilians being pulled out from underneath the rubble, and Israel bombing yet another refugee camp or another hospital or another group of tents that were a humanitarian safe zone. He's like, I'm literally looking at this right now. Right. So, in other words, he was given a little bit of airtime, precious airtime on a mainstream media network, and he's like, step aside, because I'm going to lay it all out.
You know, yes, this was a violent man, but his violence was rooted in the fact that he was born in a refugee camp. And Israel, throughout his entire life, waged a war of annihilation against the Palestinians. I'm not here to defend Yahya Sinwar. I'm here to say that we can't talk about who Yahya Sinwar was or what Hamas is without talking about 76 years of colonialism, of apartheid, of mass killing, of mowing the lawn, of controlling the calories. Yahya Sinwar's death, the White House is saying this provides a moment to sort of pivot and to make a settlement. And what does Netanyahu do in response to those speeches from Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and John Kirby? He doubles down. He goes full force, final solution on the people of northern Gaza.
So look, it's important to point out, like, what Jeremy Scahill is doing here is laying out a historical vision of how we got to this point and how you had Hamas leaders do what they did on October 7th, right? And the vision he's laying out is the resistance is born out of just endless, routine oppression, right? Counting the calories, open-air prison, I mean, you guys know the whole list. We don't need to go through it here. But what's important to point out is this is in direct contradiction of the Israeli narrative. Because the Israeli narrative is basically, to sum it up, it's like they hate us because they hate us. They hate us because they're anti-Semites, full stop, right? Like, and that hatred comes first, and everything else comes second. So, according to Israelis, if you remove all of the oppression, let's say, for the sake of argument, they would still hate us, and they would still want to kill us all, because that's just who they are. It's hatred born through ideology and ideology alone, not through material circumstances. And what Skahill's laying out is that is objectively 100% untrue, that the material circumstances in turn lead to the hatred. And then you have an ideological framework that builds out around that, right? And that's how you can have a situation where they're resistance fighters, but they're also, it's an Islamist group. It's an extremist Islamist group. There's no denying that, right? And he's laying out how you got to that point where this guy became a leader, this guy became a hero to many people in Gaza. And it's in direct contravention of the Israeli narrative of, no, they hate us because they hate us, and even if there was no oppression, they would hate us because they hate us. They're just anti-Semites. It's completely ideological in nature. They're just haters. It's that simple. And it's interesting, especially at a time when, maybe interesting isn't the right word, but like, Israel is doing an exterminationist campaign, and a campaign of annihilation and ethnic cleansing and genocide against Palestinians, right? They're doing that. So to the extent that there is purely ideologically driven, aggression here, you tell me who's doing it. You tell me who's doing it. And then you add in the dash of, look, it wasn't that long ago the Holocaust happened. And so as a direct result of the Holocaust, there was, without a doubt, a victim narrative that was built out around that, and understandably so. But this is oftentimes what happens with brutal campaigns throughout history, is that the people who end up carrying out the atrocities have this colossal victim complex and victim narrative around themselves, so they feel like whatever we do by definition is defensive, and whatever others do to us by definition is offensive and aggressive and wrong, right? And this happens, again, with all these brutal campaigns of annihilation and genocides throughout history. I mean, you literally saw this even with Nazi Germany, where you had the Treaty of Versailles, and you had people in Germany feel like they were being left behind, and it was a very austerity-driven deal. They were never going to be able to pay back all the debt. They were struggling colossally. And you had the Weimar Republic and like hyperinflation. And like out of all of this stuff rose Hitler. So it's like material conditions plus an ideological framework of hatred on top of it. And that toxic brew led to the annihilation campaign against Jews in the Holocaust, right? And then I'm sure if you do a historical analysis and go through all these different instances where stuff like this happens, I'm sure there's a horrible, toxic brew, a recipe for disaster where you mix in genuine material harm and conditions of oppression, and then that leads to an ideological framework of, we got to go on the offense all the time, but that's actually defensive because we've been oppressed and we are the oppressed people, right? So anyway, I'm babbling a little too much here, but let's continue.
Yes, let's talk about Yahya Sinwar, but my God, we cannot watch more children being shredded and say that this is okay.
Well, this is just
a political issue.
No, and I was actually going to get to that, because I was going to ask you, based on what you've just outlined for us about him, I was going to say that despite the killing of Yahya Sinwar, who was Israel's most wanted man, who was their excuse for basically doing everything as the mastermind of October 7th, we're still seeing attacks against Palestinians in northern Gaza, as you just outlined, with the siege that has been unfolding there for the last couple of weeks after a year of complete annihilation. And this was on the heels of an American president and a vice president who have said it's time for a new page, and the Israelis continuously buffing them and defying every time they've given them basically an order or demand to change course.
Okay, I need everybody to understand how devastating a point that is, right? So Israel recently assassinated the leader of Hamas's political wing in Tehran, Iran. They did a strike in Tehran, Iran, and killed the top political wing leader of Hamas, who was working on ceasefire negotiations. By the way, how do you show people you're serious about peace? Kill the person you're negotiating with, right? That's how you're really taking peace seriously, right? So you have that. And then you also have now the killing of the military wing of Hamas, the leader of the military wing of Hamas. And actually, I think after the head of the political wing was assassinated, Yahya Sinwar became the head of both, right? I believe that's the case. Correct me if I'm wrong below. But so they killed the leaders of Hamas. They killed, according to their own admission, one of the masterminds behind October 7th. You killed him. It's over. It's done. Right? Oh, and would you look at that? They keep bombing. They keep starving the population. They keep killing and massacring. Weird. It's almost like it wasn't really all about, we're going to defend ourselves against Hamas. Really shocking. That's very shocking to me. It's not like within the first week, Israel said, we're going to do a complete and utter siege and cut off all food, fuel, water, and electricity to Gaza, all 2.3 million people in Gaza. Guys, they did that even though there's only 30 or 40,000 members of Hamas. Literally in the first week, it was obvious this is collective punishment. They're not being targeted. They're not being specific. They're not being defensive. That myth was debunked in the first week. And here we are over a year later, right? And for the life of me, it's driving me fucking crazy. You know what it reminds me of? I used to bring this point up all the time. When, the war in Iraq happened, after 9/11, you have the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq. There was a time where Saddam Hussein was killed. And they didn't end the war. And I was like, wait, you guys said it was to get Saddam Hussein. You literally just killed him. Why are you not ending the war? You said that was the goal. Mission accomplished. Mission accomplished. You said it. It's over. It's done. Oh, well, they got to get Bin Laden too. They got Bin Laden too at some point. In what was it, 2009? Obama did it? And it's like, was it 9? I don't know if it's 9 or 10 or 11. Anyway, they stayed there after that. And it's like, wait, you told us we got to get Bin Laden, we got to get Saddam, and then you stayed there. So very clearly, something's not adding up here. Very clearly, this wasn't just about getting Saddam, and it wasn't just about getting Osama bin Laden. If that was the case, you would have declared victory and got the fuck out of Dodge the second those things happened. You didn't do it. By the same token here, you killed the head of the political wing, you killed the head of the military wing, and within the same week, you were bombing more fucking hospital tents. And we covered it. We showed the videos. So what is this really about? I'll tell you what it's about. We've seen, they just did a fucking rally where they were talking about we're going to resettle Gaza. In Lebanon now, they're pushing everybody north of the Litani River and they're trying to occupy southern Lebanon. It's an expansionist effort. Call it what it is. Call a spade a spade.
Yeah, that's right. And what's interesting is that the Israelis have portrayed for the past year Yahya Sinwar as a rat hiding in tunnels, using Israeli hostages as his human shields. And certainly Yahya Sinwar and others in Hamas operate in these tunnels. That's been well known. But look at the narrative, even from Israel's perspective. You laid some of this out. Yahya Sinwar died in combat gear with one of his arms basically severed, in the middle of the front end of it. And he manages to throw a stick at a drone. And the Israelis put this out and they sort of did Sinwar's job for him by solidifying his reputation as a man who was willing to die for the cause of Palestinian liberation. So we're in a situation right now where the entire Middle East is on fire. Netanyahu's house was hit. Hezbollah had one of its most successful drone strikes recently on the Golani military base, killing a number of Israeli soldiers. The United States has moved the THAAD missile system into Israel, has troops on the ground. The White House is sort of humble bragging that U.S. special operations and intelligence were assisting Israel in the operations on the ground in Gaza, including high-value targeting operations. And we have a lame duck president who really seems intent on following through with his undying support for Israel at a time when an utter lunatic is in office in Tel Aviv right now that is threatening what would amount to just a complete incendiary arson campaign throughout the Middle East that's going to be bankrolled and armed by the United States. We are in a moment where this has to stop. Right. We can't just sit here as journalists or normal people or whatever your job is and watch human beings shredded and say that's self-defense. Nothing is self-defense about this. I've covered wars for 25 years. There is nothing about self-defense with what Israel is doing right now tonight in northern Gaza.
Let me ask you finally, if I can, about whether or not, those in the U.S., some neocons, certainly a lot in Israel, see this as an opportunity to strike Iran, given the fact that Hezbollah has been weakened, Hamas has been weakened, and they see their attempt to redraw the maps of the Middle East, certainly going after the holy grail of regime change, and that is going after Iran. What is the likelihood of that? And more importantly, what would that mean?
Look, I mean, there's a reason that Dick Cheney endorsed Kamala Harris, and it's not, about, we don't want Orange Hitler to come back into power. The neocons are looking at the situation right now with the Biden administration and saying, we wouldn't have been able to achieve this. There's common ground here. This is not just about preventing Donald Trump. The neocons have long wanted the kind of war that the United States is now facilitating, and it's a bonus that it's happening under a Democratic administration because the Biden-Harris camp has been able to kind of normalize some of this for parts of their base.
All right, Jeremy Scahill, I really appreciate you joining us tonight. Appreciate you, again, reminding the world what is happening in northern Gaza, as has been happening almost every day for the better part of a year. Thank you, my friend.
And people should know that you reported bravely from the ground in Gaza yourself, and you broke an incredibly important story back in 2014. So thank you for all of your incredibly important work on the ground there.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thank you so much.
I hope Ahmed finds a decent job in media, independent media, after they shut his ass down after this interview. I'll say that, because you don't see stuff like this often. So he mentioned, Dick Cheney supporting Kamala Harris and how that's a bad omen. Because the Democrats have sort of normalized a lot of what's going on there. That's true. What's also true is this is the stuff that Trump is now saying on the campaign trail.
He's called me, yes.
What was that conversation?
He's called me. I have not spoken. I'm going to speak to him probably now.
Netanyahu.
Well, look, he's doing a good job. Biden is trying to hold him back. Just so you understand, Biden is far superior to the VP. He's trying to hold him back. And they probably should be doing the opposite, actually. I'm glad that Bibi decided to do what he had to do, but it's moving along pretty good. Everything's moving along. Yes, you have...
The final solution is moving along pretty good, huh? Biden decided to hold him back, and he shouldn't have. He should be doing the opposite of that. So Trump wants Netanyahu to go even further, right? This is what we're looking at. This is the political landscape. There was just a great analysis done by Adam Johnson and one other person. Forgive me, I'm blanking on his name. And it looked at the way MSNBC, I think it was more than just MSNBC, it may have been MSNBC and CNN, the way they cover Ukraine versus Gaza and looking at the language that's used. And you're not going to be surprised to learn that words like brutal and savage and barbaric and war crime, stuff like that was used way more often for Ukraine and almost never for Gaza. When you talk about Israeli victims versus Palestinian victims, again, every emotive, strong descriptor is used for Israeli civilians. It's not used for Palestinian civilians. And that is misleading. It's misleading. And we all know the core of it. The reason is Ukraine is our ally, but Israel is our ally. And Israel is carrying out all the brutal atrocities in Gaza. And so they get the softer language. They get the benefit of the doubt in the, well, whatever happens, they mean well. So you can't use the same sort of descriptors. You can't use the black and white terminology, right? This is how it works. This is how the game is played. And what you just saw was a rare instance of an actual reporter getting on MSNBC and going in and telling the truth. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.